The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in the known universe. Its walls stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Lights from 1,000 different worlds floated in the air like captured stars. Representatives from 13 spacefaring species sat in curved rows that rose like a mountain, each tier higher than the last based on how important that species was considered. Humanity sat at the very bottom. Admiral Park stood at the center of the floor, feeling very small. He was 63 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by old scars. He had fought in 7 wars for the Council. He had watched friends die on planets whose names he could not pronounce. And still, after 300 years of membership, humans were treated like children who should be grateful they were allowed in the room at all. Beside him stood Ambassador. She was younger than him, perhaps 45, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 20 years smiling at creatures who looked down on her species. Her smile was perfect, but had known her long enough to see the anger hiding behind it. The High Speaker floated down from the top tier. It was a being made of living crystal, tall and beautiful and cold. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "The swarm has broken through the outer rim defenses," the High Speaker announced. "They move toward the inner systems. All member species must contribute to the defense effort." Had heard about They were not a species that could be reasoned with. They were more like a force of nature, billions of creatures that moved through space and consumed everything in their path. Fighting them was like trying to fight the ocean. "Earth will provide 60% of its naval forces," the High Speaker continued. "It was not a request. Human ships will form the front line of defense. In return, humanity will continue to enjoy the privileges of Council membership." A soft sound moved through the hall. It might have been agreement. It might have been amusement. Could not tell the difference anymore. He thought about the privileges of Council membership, the technology that other species refused to share, the trade agreements that always favored everyone except Earth. The colonies humans were forbidden from establishing because some other species had claimed those stars 10,000 years ago and never used them. The wars humans had fought and bled for, always sent in first, always suffering the most casualties, always receiving the least credit. He thought about his daughter, who served on a patrol ship near the border. She would be among the first to die if he agreed to this. Leaned close to him, her voice was barely a whisper. "It is time, Admiral." They had discussed this moment for years. In secret meetings on Earth, in coded messages, in quiet conversations when they were sure no one was listening. The Council had pushed humanity too far, too many times. Everyone had a breaking point. Had reached his. "No," he said. The word was not loud. He did not shout it. He simply said it the way a person might refuse a second cup of tea. But in that great hall, the word fell like a bomb. The High Speaker's crystal body flickered. "Repeat your statement, human." "I said no." His voice was steady now. "Earth will not send its ships to die for a council that has never treated us as equals." The silence that followed was the deepest had ever experienced. In 1,000 years of the Council's existence, no species had ever refused a direct order from the High Assembly. The very idea was unthinkable. The Council was the law. The Council was civilization. To refuse the Council was to refuse reality itself. Ambassador stepped forward. Her perfect smile was gone now, replaced by something harder and more honest. "For 300 years humanity has served this Council faithfully," she said. Her voice carried through the hall, clear and cold. "We have sent our soldiers to fight your wars. We have shared our resources. We have followed your rules, and in return you have given us nothing but contempt." She began to walk slowly around the center floor, looking up at the assembled representatives. Some of them could not meet her eyes. "You used faster-than-light technology for 50 years, even though it was common knowledge. You restricted our trade until our economy nearly collapsed. You gave our colony rights to species that had been dead for centuries just to keep us small. And now, when you face a threat you cannot defeat alone, you come to us not as partners but as masters, demanding we sacrifice our children for your survival." Her voice rose. "We remember every insult, every broken promise, every time you laughed at us behind closed doors. We remember and we are finished." She turned to face the High Speaker directly. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will no longer answer to you. We will no longer fight for you. We will no longer pretend that we are anything but what you have always treated us as, strangers in your house." Felt something shift in his chest. It might have been fear. It might have been hope. After so many years of bowing and smiling and swallowing his pride, he was finally standing straight. The High Speaker's light pulsed dangerously. "You cannot do this. No species has ever left the Council." Smiled, and this time it was real. "Then we will be the first." She turned and walked toward the exit, followed her. Behind them the great hall exploded into chaos, but neither of them looked back. The stars were waiting, and for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity would face them alone, on their own terms, as masters of their own fate. The door closed behind them, and an era ended. Lieutenant was eating breakfast when the message arrived. She was stationed on Research Outpost 7, a small metal box floating in space near Council Central. Her job was to study alien plant life. It was quiet work, boring work, the kind of work nobody noticed until something went wrong. The message came through on every screen at once. It was short, just 3 words in the old Earth language that all humans still learned as children. "Come home now." Around her, the other humans on the station stopped what they were doing. There were only 12 of them among 300 alien researchers. They looked at each other with wide eyes. Everyone knew what those words meant. The Council had finally pushed too far, and Earth was calling its children back. Did not panic. She finished her breakfast calmly, then went to her small room and began to pack. She did not have many belongings. A few books, some photographs of her family back on Earth, a small plant she had grown from a seed her mother had given her. Her roommate, a tall blue-skinned being named, watched her with confusion. "Where are you going?" asked. "Home," said simply. "But your work here is not finished. The Council requires." "The Council requires nothing from me anymore." Closed her bag and looked at. They had worked together for 3 years. Was not unkind, just unaware. Like most aliens, she had never thought about what it felt like to be human in Council space. "I do not understand," said. Smiled sadly. "I know that is the problem, you never did." She walked to the docking bay where a small human transport ship was waiting. 11 other humans were already there, carrying their own bags, wearing the same expression of quiet determination. Across the galaxy, the same scene was playing out on thousands of stations, ships, and planets. Humans were leaving, not running, not fleeing in panic, but walking away with their heads held high. They left unfinished projects and confused colleagues. They left apartments and friendships and lives they had built over years. They left because Earth had called, and when Earth called, humans answered. The Council tried to stop them at first. Security forces blocked docking bays. Officials demanded explanations. Some aliens threatened, some begged, some simply stood in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. But humans kept walking. On the planet, a human engineer named calmly handed over the keys to a fusion reactor he had designed himself. The reactor powered half the continent. Without him, no one knew how to maintain it. "You cannot leave," the Meridian governor said. "We need this machine." "Then you should have thought about that before your representative voted to send my people to die," replied. "Good luck." On the trading station at Nexus Point, human merchants closed their shops and loaded their goods onto transport ships. The alien merchants watched in horror. Humans controlled 30% of the station's trade. Without them, the economy would collapse. "Please," one alien trader begged a human woman named Han. "We have been partners for 10 years. Does that mean nothing?" Paused, she had liked this trader, he had been fairer than most. "It meant everything to me," she said, "but it meant nothing to your council, take it up with them." The Great Exodus took 72 hours. By the end, every human in council space was either heading home or already there. The jump gates connecting Earth's territory to the rest of the galaxy went dark, one by one, like candles being blown out. The last gate to go dark was Gate 17, the main route between Earth and Council Central. A small crowd of aliens had gathered to watch. They could not believe that humans were really leaving. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable Spirit, and watched the gate's lights flicker. "All ships are through, Admiral," his first officer reported. "We are the last." Nodded. He felt tired but also strangely light, as if he had put down a heavy weight he had been carrying for years. "Send the final message," he said. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, in all languages. Ambassador had written it herself. "To the Galactic Council and all member species. Humanity has served you faithfully for 300 years. We asked only to be treated as equals. You refused. Now we refuse you. Do not contact us. Do not approach our borders. We want nothing from you and we offer nothing in return. You are alone now as you always wanted us to be. Perhaps now you will understand what that feels like. Goodbye." The Indomitable Spirit passed through Gate 17. Behind it, the gate's lights died, and a wall of darkness separated humanity from the rest of the galaxy. On Council Central, the High Speaker watched the empty space where the gate had been. For the first time in its long existence, the great crystal being felt something it had never felt before. Fear. Because the galaxy suddenly felt much larger, much colder, and much more dangerous than it had before, and the swarm was still coming. Humanity was gone, and no one knew if they would ever come back. 6 months had passed since humanity disappeared behind their dark gates, and the galaxy was falling apart. The swarm had consumed 12 systems. Billions of beings had died or fled their homes. The Council fleet, once the mightiest force in known space, had lost battle after battle. They had grown used to human ships leading the charge, human soldiers fighting in the worst positions, human commanders finding ways to win impossible battles. Without them, the fleet did not know how to fight. The Council had sent 17 diplomatic missions to Earth's borders. 16 had been turned away without a word. The 17th had been allowed through, carrying ambassador of the Meridian species. Had been chosen because he had worked with humans before. He understood them, or so he thought. He had even learned to speak their primary language. The Council believed he was their best hope. His ship passed through the reactivated gate and emerged in Earth's home system. What he saw made him stop breathing. Ships, thousands of ships, more than humanity had ever shown the Council. They floated in perfect formation around the blue planet, a wall of metal and power that had been hidden for who knew how long. The humans had been building in secret, preparing for this day. A voice came through his communication system. It was polite but cold. "Ambassador, you have been granted a 48-hour visa. A shuttle will escort you to the surface. Do not deviate from the approved path. Welcome to Earth." The shuttle took him to a city called Seoul, had studied human history. Seoul was one of their oldest cities, rebuilt many times over thousands of years, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw. The city was beautiful. Clean streets, tall buildings that touched the clouds, parks filled with green trees and laughing children. People walked freely without fear. They looked healthy and happy. There was no sign of the desperation had expected. The humans had not suffered from leaving the Council. They had thrived. His escort took him to a government building where Prime Minister was waiting. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but sensed strength beneath her gentle appearance. She had led Earth through the separation and guided them into this new age of independence. She offered him tea. He accepted more out of shock than thirst. "I must admit," said, sitting across from him, "we did not expect the council to send a meridian. Your people were not kind to us." Remembered, meridians had called humans useful primitives for centuries. They had blocked human advancement at every opportunity. He felt shame now, though he had not felt it then. "The council is desperate," he admitted. "The swarm advances daily. Without human ships, we cannot hold them back." Sipped her tea calmly. "And so you come to us after 300 years of insults to ask us to save you." Yes, there was no point in lying. The council offers full partnership, equal status, technology sharing, trade agreements, everything humanity ever asked for. The Prime Minister laughed softly. It was not a cruel laugh, just tired. "You offer us these things now because you need us. What happens when the swarm is defeated? Will we return to being primitives? Will you take back your promises once the danger has passed?" Could not answer. He did not know. The council had never been good at keeping promises to humans. "Set down her cup. Let me show you something, Ambassador." She took him to a window overlooking the city. Below, life continued. Children played, workers built, scientists studied, soldiers trained. Earth moved forward not despite leaving the council, but because of it. "For 300 years, we poured our energy into serving the council," said. "We sent our best minds to work on projects that benefited other species. We sent our bravest soldiers to fight wars that were not ours. We gave and received nothing but contempt." She turned to face him. "In 6 months of independence, we have achieved more than in a century of council membership. Our economy has grown by 40%. Our technology has advanced by decades. Our people are happier than they have been in generations. We do not need you, Ambassador. We never did. The council convinced us we did, but it was a lie. Felt cold despite the warm room. Then you will not help us." "I did not say that." The expression softened slightly. "There are those among us who still care about the innocent people in council space. The children, the families, the ordinary beings who never asked for any of this. They argue that we should help, not for the council's sake, but for theirs." "And what do you say?" The Prime Minister walked back to her chair and sat down heavily. She looked older now, carrying the weight of her world's decision. "I say that we must be careful. We left the council because they treated us as tools, not partners. If we return now, simply because they ask, we prove that we are exactly what they always believed us to be, servants who will come running when called." She met his eyes directly. "Go back to your council, Ambassador. Tell them what you have seen here. Tell them that humanity is not coming to save them, not unless something changes, not unless we see proof that this time will be different." Returned to Council Central 2 days later. His report was simple and devastating. "They do not need us," he told the High Assembly. "They never did, and they will not come unless we give them a reason to believe we have changed." The council listened in silence. Outside, the stars continued to burn, and the swarm continued to advance. And somewhere in the darkness, humanity waited. They reached Council Central on a day when the sky was supposed to be clear and beautiful. Instead, the sky turned black with their ships. There were millions of them, small fighters that moved like insects, giant hive ships that blocked out the stars, living weapons that did not know fear or mercy or hesitation. They came to feed, as they had fed on 12 systems before this one. They came to consume everything and leave nothing behind. The Council fleet made its final stand above the capital world. 3,000 ships from a dozen species formed a wall between the swarm and the billions of innocent lives below. They fought bravely. They fought desperately. They died quickly. In 4 hours, half the fleet was destroyed. The remaining ships pulled back, forming a last thin line that everyone knew would not hold. On the surface, evacuation sirens screamed. People ran through the streets, looking for shelter that did not exist. Parents held their children and prayed to gods they had forgotten. The High Speaker stood in the great hall where, 1 year ago, humanity had walked away. The crystal being watched the battle through 100 floating screens. It felt something it had never felt before. Despair. Send the message, it said quietly. The message was simple. It was not a demand or an order. It was a plea sent directly to Earth, carrying only a few words. Please help us, we are dying. On Earth, the Parliament building was filled with shouting voices. Representatives from every nation argued about what to do. The message from Council Central had arrived an hour ago, and opinions were divided. We owe them nothing, shouted one representative. They treated us like animals for 300 years. Let them face the consequences. But what about the innocent people? Another argued. The children, the families, they did not make the council's decisions. Should they die for the sins of their leaders? Admiral Park sat in the back of the chamber, listening silently. He was old now, older than he felt. A year of peace had been good for him. He had visited his daughter, met his new grandchild, slept without nightmares for the first time in decades. He did not want to go back to war. But war had a way of finding people, whether they wanted it or not. A young captain stood up to speak. His name was Lee, and he was not important. He commanded a small patrol ship on Earth's outer border. He had no authority in this room, but something in his eyes made people listen. My brother died in a council war, said quietly. He was 19 years old. He died fighting for a species that could not even remember his name the next day. I hated the council for that. I still do. He paused, looking around the chamber at the angry and confused faces. But I also remember something my brother told me before he left. He said he was not fighting for the council. He was fighting for the people the council claimed to protect. The ordinary people who just wanted to live their lives in peace. He believed that humans were better than our worst treatment. He believed that kindness was strength, not weakness. His voice grew stronger. If we let billions die when we could have saved them, what does that make us? We say we are better than the council. We say we left because they were cruel and unfair. But if we watch innocent children burn because we want revenge against politicians, we become exactly what they always accused us of being. He looked directly at Admiral. My brother died believing that humanity was worth fighting for. I think the question is not whether the council deserves our help. The question is whether we deserve to call ourselves human if we refuse. The chamber fell silent. Stood up slowly. Every eye turned to him. He was a legend among his people, the admiral who had said no to the council, who had led humanity's exodus, who had given them their freedom. Captain Lee is right, said. I have spent my life fighting for people who did not appreciate it. I am tired. I want to rest. I want to watch my grandchild grow up in a galaxy at peace. He walked to the center of the chamber. His old bones ached, but his voice was strong. But I also know that peace built on the graves of innocence is no peace at all. The council treated us badly. Their leaders were arrogant and cruel, but their children did not choose their leaders. Their farmers and teachers and shopkeepers did not vote to mistreat humanity. They are dying right now, not because of anything they did, but because the universe is cruel and uncaring. He raised his hand toward the great windows, toward the stars beyond. We have a choice. We can stay here safe and comfortable and tell ourselves we were justified, or we can go out there and prove that humanity is exactly what we always claimed to be. Not conquerors, not servants, but protectors. People who help because helping is right, not because we expect something in return. The vote was held 10 minutes later. It was close, closer than anyone had expected. But when the counting was done, the decision was made. Earth would go to war one more time. Admiral contacted his fleet. 4,000 ships that had been waiting in darkness for a year powered up their engines. Soldiers who had hoped for peace put on their armor again. Pilots who had been teaching their children to fly kissed their families goodbye. The jump gates began to glow. And across the galaxy, something that felt like hope stirred for the first time in months. The last council ship was burning when the gates opened. Commander O, captain of the destroyer Brave Heart, watched her sensors light up with impossible readings. One moment the sky was full of. The next moment, the jump gates that had been dark for a year exploded with light, and ships began pouring through. Human ships. Thousands of them, more than anyone had ever seen. Battleships the size of small moons. Carriers launching fighters by the hundreds. Destroyers moving in perfect formation like wolves hunting together. They came through gate after gate, an endless river of metal and fire, and at their head flew the indomitable spirit, Admiral Park's flagship. Had grown up hearing stories about the humans. Primitives, her teachers had called them. Violent creatures who fought because they did not know how to do anything else. She had believed those stories once. She did not believe them anymore. Because the humans were not attacking blindly. They were not fighting out of rage or hatred. They moved with purpose, with precision, with a cold efficiency that made them look like amateurs. And they were winning. Admiral stood on his bridge, surrounded by screens showing the battle from 1,000 angles. Beside him, Commander called out targets and coordinated fleet movements. She was young, barely 30, but she commanded like a veteran. Hive ship at Sector 7, she reported. It is launching fighters toward the civilian district. Send the third wing, ordered. Tell Captain Shin to take it apart, and I mean apart. I want that thing in pieces before it reaches the atmosphere. The third wing moved like lightning. 50 human fighters surrounded the massive hive ship and began cutting into it with precise, devastating attacks. They did not waste ammunition on the thick armor. Instead, they targeted the joints, the engines, the weak points that human scientists had spent months studying in secret. The hive ship broke apart in 7 minutes. Its fighters scattered without guidance, easy targets for the human weapons. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships did not just fight, they dismantled them. They had spent a year preparing for this moment, studying the swarm's tactics, building weapons designed specifically to destroy them. Where council ships had struggled for hours to kill a single hive ship, human fleets killed them by the dozen. But it was not easy. It was not clean. There were still countless, still hungry, still willing to throw millions of bodies against the human lines. Human ships died too. Human soldiers sacrificed themselves to protect their comrades. Human pilots flew into the hearts of hive ships and detonated their reactors, knowing they would not survive. Captain Lee led a boarding party onto a command hive that was directing the swarm's attacks. His team of 50 soldiers fought through corridors filled with monsters, losing half their number in the first 10 minutes. But they kept going, because stopping meant the swarm would keep its coordination and more people would die. Reached the command center with only 8 soldiers remaining. They destroyed it with explosives they had carried from Earth, and then they fought their way back to their ship through walls of enemies. Only 2 others made it out alive. The battle lasted 19 hours. When it ended, the sky above Council Central was clear for the first time in weeks. Wreckage floated in orbit, council ships, human ships, all mixed together in a graveyard of metal and death. But the swarm was broken. Without their command hives, the remaining scattered and fled into deep space. They would survive somewhere somehow, but they would not threaten council space again for a very long time. Sat in his command chair, exhausted beyond words. His uniform was wrinkled, his coffee was cold, and his body felt like it was made of lead. But they had won. Approached him carefully. Admiral, we are receiving transmissions from every council species. They want to talk. They are offering everything. Full partnership, highest tier status, technology access, trade agreements. Everything we asked for before we left. Laughed softly. It hurt his tired throat, but he laughed anyway. They want us to stay, continued. They are afraid of what happens if we leave again. The Admiral looked out the viewport at the stars. They were beautiful as they always were. Humanity had reached for those stars 3,000 years ago, and they had never stopped reaching. They had been servants, soldiers, diplomats, and outcasts, and now, finally, they were equals. But was that enough? He thought about the people who had died in the battle, the pilots who had sacrificed themselves, the soldiers like team who had walked into certain death because it was the right thing to do. They had not fought for status or rewards. They had fought because people were dying and they could help. That was what made humanity special, not their ships or their weapons or their stubborn refusal to surrender. It was their ability to choose mercy when vengeance was easier, to help when walking away was safer, to be kind when the universe rewarded cruelty. Tell them we will think about it, said finally, and tell them we will need to see changes before we make any decisions, real changes, not promises, actions. Nodded and turned to send the message. Closed his eyes. Somewhere on Earth, his grandchild was sleeping peacefully, not knowing that her grandfather had just helped save the galaxy. She would grow up in a universe where humanity was respected, where their sacrifice was remembered, where being human meant something more than just surviving. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. Outside, the stars continued to burn, as they had burned for billions of years. They did not care about politics or species or wars. But for one brief moment, when humanity had walked away and then chosen to return, it had seemed like even the stars were watching, waiting to see what humanity would do. And humanity had chosen to be heroes. Not because they had to, because they could.